Now, on my channel, I have talked a lot about different Japanese films, from the weird to the gangster films, to films about youth, etc. etc. However, there is one film that I want to talk about, which might just be the most insane film I've ever watched, that being Love Exposure. Now, the film is no joke, 4 hours of covering many subjects from religion, cults, gender roles, taboo subjects, Japanese culture, and several other themes. It isn't afraid to hide away from some very taboo subjects. Now, the film follows Yu, a young boy who, after his mother's death, his father decides to become a priest and makes his son confess to his sins every day, which Yu doesn't really have anything meaningful to confess. And after his dad sees through this, Yu decides to commit sins, no doubt fueled by his dad having a relationship with a prostitute, and moving house with her, and eventually his dad and the prostitute moving out. Now, the sins Yu commits aren't that crazy, like breaking classmates' rubber and taking a ball away from some kids. However, after being kicked out of the church and forced to live alone by his dad, Yu stumbles upon people from his school committing crime and decides to join in with them. Committing sins such as shoplifting and fighting, happily confessing his sins to his dad, much to his dad's disapproval. Eventually, Yui and his group of friends become scene photographers, going around the streets getting all kinds of photos. Despite being what his friends call one of the most sensible things a person can do, but also so that you can find his Maria, aka Mary, which he spends the first half of the film looking for. Yui again confesses to his dad, which he finally hits Yui, which in Yui's twisted mind is what he wanted, as he wanted his dad to act like his dad instead of a priest. Yui continues his photography in order to find his Maria, which he know he'll find once he becomes excited, if you know what I mean. The guy who taught him photography says, Yui is banned from entering the church by his father, and after starts praying outside, when he photographs a group of girls, when they catch him, however, one of them, Koike, interrogates him, asking about who he is and what he does. Now, after that scene, we cut to a scene of a report about a church called the Zero Church, which it's made quite obvious that it's a cult. Yui's friends then ask Yui to teach him how to be a photographer like him, which he does when we see those same girls in the background film Yui. Much to Yui's surprise, his dad returns home, cooking him up a meal. We see the prostitute named Kaori has a daughter, which is noticed by Koike and her group, who continue to stalk Yui, then follow Kaori and her daughter and calls the guys. Yui's friends dare him to walk around in drag and kiss the girl he likes, if his photos are as good as theirs, which he agrees to, and of course he loses. Thus he walks around in drag in order to find his Maria, which they encounter Kaori's daughter, who gets confronted by a group of men, who she then decides to fight all of them, in which before doing so, Yui joins in as Miss Scorpion, wherein she prays to Jesus. Thus Yui finds his Maria. And during Yui's narration, he states that he is in love. Now that's just the first half of the film, being around the 1 hour mark of the film. We shift perspective to Koike, who we see as an all-round bad person, from scamming through making a fake charity, drug dealing in order to put money into the Zero Church, which she is one of the leaders of, but we see her reason for joining, and hatred for Christianity, due to her dad's abuse towards her, which was hidden by his good image outside of his home. We see him in hospital, the reason being he had a stroke, but also yeah, which we see in full detail in the film, which of course I cannot show. Which this physical abuse from her dad leads her to not being mentally right, like killing her crush due to not being able to take it, intercourse being a sin, and her getting away for damage to her dad, where we see her recruited to the Zero Church. And we see her rise to power and her plan to convert Yui, and especially his dad's church, to the Zero Church. And we learn the name of Maria, that being Yoko. Perspective shifts again, as we see Yoko's view on the day of the fight, where we see her mother partying in a club while Yoko leaves after a report on the TV about a shooting, which Yoko imagines herself being there, and she also talks about invisible bullets being around all the time. Essentially, Yoko's awareness of death always being around was, from her perspective, everyone else ignores it. We learn of her childhood abuse from her dad, who would shift partners constantly, and her job as a house destroyer, which she is able to take her anger out on said job. Because of this, we see Yoko hates men, idolizing famous musicians and rock stars. The only man she likes is Kurt Cobain, which I'll get into later. We see Yoko takes a liking to Kaori, who introduces her to Jesus, who she tells Yoko that Jesus is cooler than Kurt Cobain. After the fight, we see Yoko fall in love with Yui as Miss Scorpion, where he steals his friend's sunglasses, and we see Yui have his first moment of excitement he's ever had, and kisses Yoko, and then running away to the church, thanking God for answering his prayers. Church now fully wiretapped by Kyoko, who listens in. We see that due to thinking his Maria, Yui has lost interest in his job as a photographer, due to that being the reason he did the job to find his Maria. In school, Yoko moves into his class, which of course excites him, however she obviously doesn't recognise him, thus the feeling isn't replicated. Due to them not getting along in school, Yui orchestrates a meeting with Yoko in his costume, where Yoko gives Miss Scorpion her number. Now Yui's dad invites him to have dinner at a restaurant with Kaori. He brings along of course Yoko, much to both of Yui and Yoko's shocks and dismay, thus resulting in them becoming step-siblings, which we see this causes Yoko and her friends die of laughter due to them continue to bug and listen to everything. Eventually, Kyoki poses as a student in their class, which of course shocks Yui, and then we see she hired a group of gangsters to break into the classroom and call out the name Scorpion, in which Kyoki beats them up and convinces Yoko she was Scorpion the whole time. And of course, Kyoki knows everything Miss Scorpion and Yoki said to each other, and Kyoki basically tries to ruin Yui's lives via blackmailing him and even getting invited into their house, where she basically turns Yui's family against him, where she consoles Yui's dad about the struggles of committing a sin against the Catholic Church, and Yui does actually confront Yoko as Miss Scorpion, however it just makes everything worse as it disappoints Yoko. On the next day at school, Yui is expelled from school as Kyoki exposes his photography career via planting tons of photos around his classroom. At his home with everyone present, Yui's dad beats him, whilst Yui tries to reason with Yoko, however to no avail. Kyoki basically guilt-tripping Yui's dad and Kaori alongside Yoko to start fresh, Yui running away, being found by his friends. Yui and his friends find that everyone has disappeared from his dad, Kaori, to Kyoki, and Yoko, causing panic in the church. We find out that Kyoki has recruited them to Zero Church, and Kyoki calls to tease Yui and telling him to go meet people from an adult company, in which Yui and his gang are recruited as professional photographers, which Kyoki's friends say is the only way Yui will be able to meet Yoko. They are made to go to this sort of messed up adult version of church, where Yui is the priest, has to forgive people of their sins, which we get tons of really weird messed up people, and one guy who confesses to having a bomb, which will be important later on in this video. Yui is able to talk to Yoko, however it's clear she has been mind controlled by Zero Church, and becomes much more monotone, which of course disheartens Yui. And we see both Yoko and Kyoki on live TV due to allegations of misconduct against the church. Yui's friends spot Yoko and try to get Yui to reason with her to no avail, thus they end up kidnapping Yoko. When Yui and Yoko are left alone in an abandoned bus near the beach, with Yui's friends coming in, usually just to see how he is. Yoko tries to escape, leading to maybe the film's best scene where an infuriated Yoko opens the Bible in a great piece of acting, really selling the distraught she has been through and why a person needs love in their life and the power it can have. Eventually, the Zero Church finds the location of them and eventually forces Yui into joining the Zero Church, which he does, and we see their teaching methods, wherein Kyoki tries to seduce Yui several times to no avail. We see Yui mate up with the bomb expert from earlier in the film, and Yui's friends help him get weapons and he goes on a rampage in the church HQ, trying to find Yoko's dress as Miss Scorpion. Intercut with Yui's family and Kyoki's friends eating and smiling. After finally finding Yoko and killing a few guards, Kyoki tells the rest of the guards to go away and stop restraining Yui, which she teases Yui, and Yui tries again to plead with visibly tearful Yoko. Yui detonates the bomb before being almost killed by Yoko, where Yui pleads with her and confesses his love to her. She doesn't kill him. The police eventually arrive and Kyoki, after realizing Yui truly loves Yoko, ends her life. The Yui's family and Yoko have recovered as well. However, Yoko is clearly sad due to Yui being put in a mental institution, wherein he teases other patients and believes he actually is Miss Scorpion. We see Yoko visit him, however he doesn't remember anything at all, which saddens Yoko until she locks him into her room where they try to get him to remember who he used to be. Yoko is taken away by the police, and after, floods of memories come back to Yui, as he remembers who he is, and runs away from the hospital, getting chased as he does so. Yoko, in the back of a police car, spots Yui and chokes a police officer in order for him to stop his car. Film ending with them both reunited. Yeah, I hope you can see why this film is so insane, whether it be the over-the-top fight scenes and violence, to the film's creative, oftentimes silly, but very fitting cinematography, to the costumes, all add to this insane film, which took a comedic over-the-top approach to a story with several big themes, which the film I think shows parallels between the Zero Church and the Catholic Church, and how they both can manipulate people for their financial gain and abuses of power. But we see Zero Church go to much more extreme measures compared to Catholic Church in the film, and this added to further by Yui's paralleling his dad in his confessions, where they are essentially doing the same thing as we see Yui confesses to some serious crimes to his dad, and the perverts confess their fantasies to Yui. The film, I think, took maybe the best approach to its story, using comedy to satirize and make commentary on these issues, like the dirty photography, wherein we see they made the head of the gang looked like a sort of guru, but at the end of the day, all he is a dirty old perv. Also some subtle stuff, like Kurt Cobain being the only man Yoko likes due to Cobain being a much more progressive person than most people at the time, as well as his sometimes going for a kind of androgynous look, thus foreshadowing Yoko's love for Miss Scorpion, and just the insane stuff that happens in the film. From people's manhood getting removed, Yui getting excited being a visual metaphor for his love of someone, the fight scenes in the classroom, which just feel straight out of a cartoon, as do most of the fight scenes in the film. The photography montage scene, which I think does work well, despite it tackling a really uncomfortable taboo subject, rightfully so, I may add. In conclusion, I believe this is the craziest film perhaps ever made. The cinematography, the acting, the editing, the action, a kaleidoscope of different ideas, and the themes all put in a 4-hour cinematic experience, not quite like any you'll ever see, in my opinion, ever.